Imagine sitting on a secret that is, it's worth literally billions of dollars.
Oh, wow. Yeah, billions.
Right. The entire global reading public is desperately trying to guess the ending to your story.
Yeah.
I mean, there are online forums, entire books written just to theorize what will happen.
Massive media speculation everywhere.
Exactly. And yet you just casually pull an actor aside and whisper the ultimate final twist of the entire saga right to him.
That is just, it's such a wild risk.
It really is. You do this years before the final book is even published, and you do it purely to convince him to take a job in a movie. And, that is exactly what J.K. Rowling did with Alan Rickman back in the year 2000, just to get him to play Severus Snape.
It's an astonishing amount of trust, really. You're handing over, the most guarded intellectual property on the planet to someone you barely know.
Yeah, exactly.
And you do it knowing full well that if it leaks, it completely compromises a massive literary empire.
It totally does. And, welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so thrilled you're here with us today. Because we often look at these massive, multi-billion-dollar franchises, and we just assume their success was a mathematical certainty.
Oh, for sure. You see the theme parks, the merchandise.
Right, the global box office dominance.
Yeah.
It all feels like it was always destined to be this cleanly executed corporate victory. But today, our mission is to explore the incredibly messy, chaotic, and seemingly impossible foundation of the Harry Potter film franchise.
Impossible is really the right word.
Yeah, we are looking at a 10-year production landscape that was constantly shifting under everyone's feet. It's a story of these high-stakes creative gambles, sheer logistical nightmares, and intense personal costs.
And all of that aimed at turning an unfinished 700-page book series to a $7.7 billion cinematic.
It's just staggering. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really grasp the gravity of what we're talking about here, you have to transport yourself back to the industry mindset of the year 2000.
Right, the landscape is totally different.
Completely different. Hollywood looked at this property and genuinely labeled it an impossible project. And that wasn't an exaggeration at all.
No.
Just imagine the pressure cook. You have a fan base that isn't just large. They are obsessively, terrifyingly loyal to the text.
Terrifyingly is right. Every single detail mattered to them.
Exactly. Plus, you have a series of massive novels that the author is still actively writing.
Which is crazy.
Right, meaning you have absolutely no idea where the overarching narrative is actually going.
You're flying completely blind.
And crucially, you have an author who is fiercely protective of her world and deeply, deeply distrustful of the Hollywood machine.
Because, she knows how easily a studio can just strip mine a beloved story for parts.
Oh, absolutely. She'd seen it happen.
And that protective instinct is where this whole house of cards almost falls apart before it's even built. To adapt a project of this massive scale, you need a blueprint.
You need a writer.
Right. You need a lead screenwriter. And the studio, Warner Brothers, they pick an American writer named Steve Kloves.
An American, which was a huge point of contention.
Huge. So producer David Hyman brings Kloves into a room to meet Rowling in 2000, and they start out essentially as enemies.
Yeah, it was tense.
Very tense. She was incredibly skeptical. Her immediate internal reaction was basically, he's an American, and he is going to completely rip apart my baby.
Which honestly is a completely understandable defense mechanism.
Oh, for sure.
The cultural translation from a profoundly British boarding school story to a glossy Hollywood blockbuster, it usually involves a massive loss of texture.
You lose the charm, right?
Exactly. So Kloves walks into that room, and he can literally feel the hostility. This is a highly coveted job, and he knows he's losing it before they've even sat down.
He's dead on arrival.
Basically, yeah. He has to disarm that bomb immediately. And he manages to do it by offering one specific...
Oh, I love this part.
He tells her that his absolute favorite character in the books is Hermione.
And that one comment, entirely flips the dynamic. Her defenses just drop.
Yeah.
But, okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because if I'm preparing for a high-stakes job interview, right, and I know the person interviewing me is fiercely protective of their intellectual property, I'm doing my research.
Sure, you're looking for an edge.
Exactly. I'm going to look for the character that makes me seem thoughtful and deep. It sounds like a really brilliant, tactical job interview trick,
I see what you're saying.
You just drop the name Hermione to prove you aren't just in it for the broomsticks and the explosion.
That's a very sharp read, actually. And if this were just a standard Hollywood pitch, that's exactly what it was. A tactical maneuver.
Right. Just a smart play.
But what's fascinating here is why that specific answer resonated so deeply with the author and, well, the proof of its sincerity.
Okay, unpack that. Why did it work so well?
Think about the architecture of those early... Hermione isn't the flashy hero. She doesn't have the lightning scar or the tragic chosen one backstory.
She's just the smart kid in the library.
Exactly. She is the intellect, the emotional anchor, the slightly awkward, fiercely loyal outsider who just gets by on sheer hard work and empathy.
Yeah, she earns everything.
So by elevating Hermione, Cloves signaled that he understood the emotional and intellectual core of the narrative. He was essentially telling her, I see the humanity in your story, not just the...
So he recognized the beating heart of the books, not just the marketable magic.
Precise. And the proof that this wasn't just, a cheap interview trick lies in the unprecedented access that followed.
Right, because she didn't just hire him, she trusted him.
Exact. This conversation didn't just win him a contract, it forged a decade-long creative alliance. I mean, they exchanged hundreds of details.
Hundreds.
But most importantly, Rowling opened up a vault of unpublished character details.
Wait, really? Like things that weren't even in the books yet?
Oh, entirely. Things that had never been printed, backstories that wouldn't see the light of day for years.
Which brings us back to that idea of trust, because you do not hand over the unwritten future of your life's work just because someone gave a slick answer in a boardroom.
No, never.
You only do that if you genuinely believe the person Cross going to protect.
Because when you are adapting a living, breathing story that hasn't finished being told, trust is literally the only real currency.
Yeah, the story is still forming.
Right. If Cloves writes a scene in movie 2 that contradicts plot point she has planned for book 5, I mean, the entire continuity shatters.
The fans would go crazy.
Oh, they would riot. He needed to know the secrets so he didn't accidentally build a wall where she eventually needed a door.
That's a great way to put it. But, securing the words is really only the first hurdle here.
The easiest one, arguably.
Right. You can have a perfectly engineered script, but it means absolutely nothing if you don't have the right human beings to bring it to life. And Rowling still held a massive trump card, which was absolute veto power over casting.
Which creates what is arguably the most terrifying high-stakes puzzle in modern cinema history.
Truly terrifying.
Casting the core trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it wasn't just a matter of finding kids that hit their mark. They launched a massive nationwide search across the United Kingdom.
Seeing thousands and thousands of children.
Yes, and the way they ultimately found them is just so wonderfully chaotic.
It really is. Take Daniel Radcliffe, for example.
Right, tell them about that.
So, producer David Hammond just happens to be sitting in a theater in London watching a production of David Copperfield, and he looks at this 11-year-old kid on stage, and something just clicks.
A total lightning bolt moment.
Yeah, he feels like he's actually looking at the chosen one.
Yeah.
And when Rowling is finally shown his screen test, her approval is just instantaneous. She just says, he looks like Harry.
Which is the ultimate validation. If the creator sees it, you're done. But the contrast with how they found Rupert Grint is what really highlights the bizarre nature of this cast.
Oh, it's completely absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, you have this massive corporate apparatus, Warner Brothers, searching for a co-lead in a multi-billion-dollar investment.
High stakes, very serious.
And 11-year-old Rupert Grint just bypasses the formal audition process entirely. He sends in a homemade video of himself rapping about why he wants the part.
A rap video.
It's like a Fortune 500 company conducting rigorous, high-stress boardroom interviews for a new CEO, and a guy just kicks down the door, does a chaotic tap dance on the mahogany table, and says, I'm the guy.
That analogy perfectly captures the psychology of why it worked, though.
Exactly.
Grint wasn't demonstrating classical acting technique. I mean, he was demonstrating an essence.
He was being Ron.
Right. Ron Weasley is a character defined by a slightly rebellious, underdog, chaotic energy. He doesn't play by the formal rules of high society.
No, he's messy.
By submitting a rap video to a highly formalized British fantasy audience, Grint proved he inherently possessed the exact frequency of...
That's brilliant. And then, there's Emma Watson, who was only 10 years old at the time and had absolutely zero professional acting experience. None.
Nothing on her resume.
Yet she comes in and just crushes the chemistry reads, alongside Radcliffe and Grint.
We throw the phrase chemistry read around a lot, but we really should define what that actually means, especially for a 10-year-old with absolutely no...
Yeah, what are they actually looking for?
Well, a chemistry read isn't about whether you can deliver a line perfectly in a vacuum. It's about empathy and reaction.
Right.
How do you respond when the other person changes their tone? Do you actually listen to them, or are you just waiting for your turn to...
Which is hard for adults to do.
Exactly. The director saw that Watson had this innate raw presence. She was truly engaging with the other boys in real time, which is a very rare, unteachable skill at that age.
And by August 2000, that trio is locked in. But, looking back now, it's so easy to view them as the definitive, inevitable faces of these characters.
They're iconic now.
Right. The reality of that decision in the moment, though, it had to be absolutely terrifying.
Oh, it is a staggering gamble. You are casting 10 and 11-year-olds not for a single contained family movie, right? But for a planned, decade-long narrative arc.
A decade.
You are placing hundreds of millions of dollars on a bet that human biology and psychology will cooperate.
And that never happens.
Right. You are gambling that these specific children will organically mature into highly capable, nuanced adult actors who can actually carry incredibly dark, traumatic material 7 years down the line.
Yeah, because the later books get so heavy. What if they just lose interest in acting at age 14?
Exactly. What if they just cannot handle the emotional weight of the later scripts? It's an impossible wager that somehow miraculously paid off.
It really is. But the intense pressure of casting didn't stop with the kids. I mean, the adult casting was equally delicate, heavily driven by Rowling's vision, and carried its own unique weight.
Very much so.
Like, Robbie Coltrane was handpicked from the jump for Hagrid, and Richard Harris was brought in to play Dumbledore because he possessed this profound, almost ethereal quietness that perfectly mirrored the character's immense, understated power.
He was brilliant, and Harris's casting brings up the harsh reality of long-term productions.
Oh, right.
Because he sadly passed away in October 2002, just after finishing the second.
It was heartbreaking.
It really was. And logistically, when you lose a central pillar of your cast, it can derail an entire franchise.
Totally.
Michael Gambon had to step into that monumental role and carry the character through the remaining 6 films.
Which brings us back to the hook we started with, actually. Alan Rickman as Severus Snape. Because Rickman actually hesitated to take the role initially.
He really did.
He had just finished a run of playing these iconic cinematic villains, and he was highly reluctant to just step into another generic bad guy caricature. He needed to know there was depth.
And this is where the unprecedented intertwining of literature and cinema reveals itself so starkly.
Yeah, this is the craziest part.
To convince an actor of Rickman's caliber to commit, Rowling couldn't just promise him, like, hey, the character gets interesting later. She had to prove it.
She had to show her cards.
Exactly. She pulled him aside and mapped out the ultimate trajectory of Snape, revealing the deeply tragic hidden motivation that wouldn't actually be published for almost another decade.
The psychological weight of carrying that secret as an actor is just incredible.
Oh, imagine the pressure.
He is acting in the very first film, sneering at an 11-year-old Harry Potter while possessing a piece of knowledge that recontextualizes his entire performance.
Right.
He knows the tragic destination, which allows him to calibrate every single micro-expression path.
Exactly. I mean, if he plays Snape purely as a malicious villain, the final twist feels totally unearned and manipulates the audience.
Yeah, it would feel like a cheap trick.
But because he knew the why behind the hostility, he could layer in the agonizing conflict, the resentment intertwined. Dude, it's really a masterclass in why an actor needs the full blueprint of a character to build a truly resonant performance.
Okay, so you have the perfect cast locked in. You have the writer on board. But all of this conceptual brilliance immediately crashes into the unforgiving mathematics of filmmaking.
The hard reality.
Right, because adapting these books required a brutal physical compression of the narrative.
It's essentially a problem of narrative physics. As the literary series progressed, Rowling's world builded.
It got masked.
The later novels swell to over 700 pages of dense, intricate plotting, featuring dozens of subplots, historical tangents, and massive cast supporting characters.
But a studio movie operates within a very rigid container. I mean, you have roughly 2.5 hours before audience fatigue sets in and theaters start losing showtimes.
Right, it's a math problem. And this creates an intense, unavoidable friction between the medium of the novel and the medium of the screenplay.
They just don't map one-to-one.
Not at all. A novelist has the luxury of infinite real estate. They can spend 40 pages exploring the daily routine of a poltergeist or the political structure of magical government.
Which is fun to read.
Very. But a screenwriter is performing narrative triage. They must identify the central beating heart of the protagonist's emotional journey and ruthlessly sever any appendage that does not directly propel that specific 2-hour arc.
And the triage on these films was heavy. I mean, entire beloved subplots were completely amputated.
They had to be.
Like Peeves, the poltergeist, who is a constant presence in the books, was entirely erased. The sprawling, complex socio-political arc regarding the house elf, almost completely gutted.
And we really have to ask why those specific cuts were necessary. Take Peeves, for example.
Yeah, fans are so mad about Peeves.
I know. But in a novel, an episodic encounter with a chaotic ghost provides charming texture and world building between chapters.
A nice little break.
But in a 2-hour film structured around rising tension and thriller mechanic, a sudden comedic disruption from a poltergeist actively kills the narrative momentum.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
It diffuses the tension you just spent 10 minutes building. Kloves understood that in film, pacing doesn't advance the spine of the plot, it has to go.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This friction wasn't just happening in a quiet writer's room months before production.
No, it was live.
The struggle over what to keep and what to cut bled directly onto the active film set. They were arguing over scripts, sending frantic emails, and literally faxing rewritten dialogue pages directly to the set while the cameras were rolling.
It is the definition of building the airplane while you are already in free fall.
Oh my gosh.
You have an author fiercely guarding the integrity of her universe and a screenwriter desperately trying to hit a runtime.
Can you imagine the sheer panic of that environment?
It sounds like a nightmare.
You're an actor strapped into a complex wire rig, or a cinematographer trying to light a massive practical set with hundreds of extras, and you're all just standing around waiting for a fax machine to spit out the dialogue for the scene you have to shoot before the sun goes.
The stress levels would be astronomical. It forces everyone to operate entirely on it.
Just survive.
But eventually, this strategy of compression hit a mathematical impossibility. When it came to adapting the 7th and final book, The Deathly Hallows, Kloves is doing his usual triage, and he realizes that you simply cannot fit the climax of a 7-book saga into a single 2-hour window without destroying the emotional payoff entirely.
Which leads to Warner Brothers announcing in early 2008 that they're going to break the established format and split the final book into 2 separate films, shot back.
A huge deal at the time.
Now let's pause here, because I want to ask you, the listener, to think about your immediate reaction when a studio announces they're taking one book and stretching it into 2.
We all know the reaction.
Right, because the overwhelming cynical reflex is always, oh, this is a corporate cash grab. They just want to double their box office revenue.
Yep, that's what everyone said.
So was it just a cynical financial play?
It's the most natural assumption in the world. But if we analyze the narrative mechanics of that final book, the defense for splitting it is bulletproof.
Okay, walk us through it.
Think about the final act, the Battle of Hogwarts. It isn't just a quick action. It is a massive, multi-front war involving hundreds of characters, massive structural destruction, and critically, the final emotional resolutions for dozens of character arcs that have been building for a decade.
Yeah, you have to pay off Harry, Ron, Hermione, Snape, Neville, Malfoy, all the teachers, the villains.
Everyone. If you attempt to compress all of that, the search for the magical artifacts, the philosophical revelations, and an all-out siege into the 3rd act of a single movie, you are left with a highlight reel, not a narrative.
It would just be a blur.
The pacing would be hyperventilated. Splitting it allowed the first part to be a tense psychological road, and the second part to function entirely as an uninterrupted operatic war.
So it was a created necessity disguised as a financial victory.
Exact. Both things can be.
But, dealing with the stress of a script and splitting a movie, that's all conceptual. That happens on paper. The conceptual friction is really nothing compared to the physical, grueling, industrial reality of maintaining this world.
Oh, the physical production is a whole other.
Let's dig into the logistics of what became the longest continuous film shoot in history.
The scale of the physical production is staggering. They operated continuously from the year 2000 all the way to 2011. 11 uninterrupted years.
Wow.
To accommodate a production of that size, Warner Brothers took over Leavesden Studios, which was historically an aircraft factory, and transformed it into an evolving, permanent campus.
An aircraft factory.
Yeah.
I love that detail because it perfectly captures the industrial manufacturing scale of what they were doing.
It really does.
They were essentially operating a massive factory where the product was cinema.
And because they had this permanent home, they revolutionized how sets were treated.
Oh, right. Tell them about the sets.
Typically, a film builds a set, shoots the scene, and immediately tears it down to make room for the next.
Because space is expensive.
Exactly. But at Leavesden, massive constructions like the Great Hall or the Gryffindor Common Room were built once, and then they were meticulously maintained, expanded, and allowed to physically age over the decade.
That's so...
The stone floors were genuinely worn down by the actors walking on them year after year. The wood darkened. The sets aged in real time alongside the cast, which creates a subconscious tactile reality for the audience.
You can really feel it on screen. But, an airplane factory doesn't look like Scotland no matter how much you dress it up.
No, it doesn't.
So they had to weave these sound stages together with over 150 real locations across the UK. You have the ancient sweeping architecture of Gloucester Cathedral doubling as Hogwarts corridors, seamlessly cutting to the raw, dramatic landscapes of the Scottish Highlands.
A logistical nightmare to coordinate.
And navigating this massive, sprawling apparatus over 11 years were 4 different directors, each essentially being handed the baton while the marathon was already at a sprint.
Which is an incredible feat of tonal management. I mean, how do you change the captain of the ship without breaking the continuity of the voyage?
It's so risky.
Very risky. Chris Columbus established the baseline with the first 2 films. He brought a very warm, golden, Dickensian aesthetic that perfectly captured the innocence of a child discovering a magical world.
Feels very safe, like stepping into a classic.
But innocence doesn't last. As the characters hit their teenage years, the visual language had to mature.
Enter Alfonso Cuarón.
Right. Cuarón takes over for the 3rd film, Prisoner of Azkaban, and completely upends the aesthetic.
Yeah, he really shook.
The lighting becomes moodier, the camera moves are more aggressive, and the characters start wearing normal clothes instead of robes all the time. It grounds the magic in a gritty, rebellious adult reality.
Then Mike Newell brings a slightly more expansive, action-oriented tone for The Goblet of Fire.
A lot bigger set.
Right. But finally, David Yates steps in for the 5th film and anchors the entire back half of the franchise, directing the final 4 massive movies. And he brings this incredibly bleak, urgent, wartime realism.
Yates himself recognized the absolute absurdity of the timeline, later describing it as the longest continuous shoot in cinematic history.
It's exhausting just to think about.
And the manpower required to sustain that vision is immense. We're talking about over 2,400 crew members rotating through this world.
That's a small town.
Literally. The costume department alone had to conceptualize, fabricate, and maintain over 19,000 individual costumes.
19,000. Which brings me to the absolute most fascinating logistical nightmare of this entire production. Out of all the moving parts, the one that blows my mind is how they managed what we'll call the growing up dilemma.
Oh, this is the best part.
We have these 3 lead actors, starting at 11 years old and finishing at 21. That is a decade of the most aggressive biological changes a human body goes through.
You literally transform.
Their voices drop, their faces change shape, and their heights explode, but the narrative only ages them 1 year per movie.
This is where the scheduling logistics become a mathematical horror show.
A horror show.
The shooting schedule of a blockbuster is never chronological. They might shoot a scene set in the Gryffindor common room in September and then realize they need a pickup shot for that exact same scene 6 months later in March.
Happens all the time.
But in those 6 months, a 13-year-old actor might have grown 3 inches.
How do you physically hide that? The costume department is caught in a never-ending battle against human biology.
They're fighting nature.
They are constantly, subtly hemming and altering the school uniforms mid-production. They are adjusting the lengths of robes and the fit of sweaters week by week just to create the illusion of continuity within a single film.
And if the physical growth spurts weren't challenging enough, well, let's talk about the legal constraints of casting.
Oh, right, the labor laws.
I want you to imagine managing a multi-million-dollar corporate op. You have a massive soundstage lit. You have hundreds of highly skilled, highly paid crew members on the clock.
Burning through cash every minute.
Right. But the core assets of your entire operation, your lead actors, are subject to strict UK child labor laws. They are legally restricted to working only a handful of hours each day.
You can't just ask a 12-year-old to push through a 14-hour Friday night shoot just because you're behind schedule.
No, you absolutely cannot.
When their hours are up, they are legally mandated to leave the set, period.
It creates a massive domino effect. If a light bulb blows or a camera jams and you lose an hour of shooting time, you don't just work late to make it up, you lose the day.
The day is just gone.
Gone. To combat this, the production had to utilize incredibly complex system. They heavily relied on double crews, literally shooting dialogue over the shoulders of adult body doubles while the actual child actors were offset.
Smoke and mirrors.
And they had to build fully functioning school setups with on-set tutors to ensure the kids were meeting their legal educational requirements while they were dressed as wizards.
The logistics of coordinating the availability of the child actor, the adult actor, the location availability, and the weather meant that these massive, rigid production schedules were constantly collapsing.
We're constantly putting out fire.
They had to essentially rebuild the schedule for a blockbuster movie. Nearly every single. It is a genuine miracle these films hit their release dates.
It represents a pinnacle of project management. I mean, they built a system flexible enough to absorb daily chaos without breaking the overarching mission.
And that machinery was pushing the absolute boundaries of what was technically possible on screen. The visual effects journey of this franchise is a fascinating reflection of how the industry itself evolved.
It's like a time capsule of VFX.
But all of that boundary-pushing scale came with very real, terrifying human stakes. Let's move into the human cost of this match, the massive VFX triumph, and the ultimate perplexing snub from the industry's elite.
If you track the visual effects from film 1 to film 8, you are essentially watching the rapid maturation of digital cinema in the 2000s.
It happened so fast.
In the early days, for characters like the house elves, they relied heavily on physical, practical puppets. They needed something tangible on set for the actors to interact with.
But how do you bridge the gap between a rubber puppet and a believable, emotive creature on screen?
It requires a highly complex layering process. You start with a physical animatronic to give the child actors a real eye line, so they aren't just talking to a tennis ball on a stick.
Right.
Then you scan that practical model into a computer, digitally build a skeleton and musculature underneath it, and finally map the high-resolution textures over the top.
So cool.
And as the films progressed, the reliance on purely digital creations exploded. We see the introduction of massive, fully CGI dragons for the Triwizard Tournament, the ethereal skeletal thestrals, the Dementors, and the glowing fluid dynamic Cronus charm.
And the culmination of all this technology hits its peak in the split finale.
Right, the massive battle.
The Battle of Hogwarts sequence required thousands of individual VFX shots. But they didn't just abandon practical filmmaking.
Right.
They were blending massive digital armies with very real, highly dangerous practical effects.
Very dangerous.
We're talking massive controlled explosions and huge structural set destruction happening right next to the performers.
And this relentless pursuit of physical authenticity, building actual giant sets, using real fire, relying on practical wire work, instead of just relying completely on safe green screens, it brings the margin for error down to zero.
Zero room for mistake.
It carries an inherent, profound physical danger. It strips away the illusion of movie magic and reminds us that action filmmaking is an incredibly hazardous industrial job.
And that reality hit the production in the most devastating way imaginable. In January 2009, while they were filming The Deathly Hallows Part 1, there was a catastrophic accident on set.
Yeah, this was really...
They were coordinating a high-impact stunt involving a snake attack sequence with Daniel Radcliffe's stunt double, a young man named David Holmes.
It involved a complex high-tension wire rig and a planned practical explosion to simulate the character being thrown backward.
And the mechanics of the stunt just failed horribly. The timing or the tension was off, and the result was an absolute tragedy.
It was awful.
David Holmes suffered a catastrophic spinal injury that left him permanently paralyzed. It's noted as one of the darkest, saddest moments in the entire 11-year history of the franchise.
It profoundly shifts your perspective. I mean, we sit in a comfortable theater, we eat our popcorn, and we watch these characters get blasted by dark magic and thrown through stone walls, and we consume it purely as entertainment.
Yeah, we don't think about it.
We completely abstract the fact that a real human being put their physical safety on the line, trusting a wire and an explosive charge to create that visceral thrill for us. The tragic injury to David Holmes is a permanent, sobering reminder of the very real human cost required to bring these massive fictions into reality.
It grounds the entire conversation. Despite overcoming the creative clashes, the scheduling nightmares, and the life-altering on-set tragedies, the franchise endured. It survived.
It kept going.
And in 2011, at the BAFTA ceremony, J.K. Rowling, David Heyman, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watts stood on stage together to accept the award for Outstanding British Contribution,
which is largely recognized as the single most significant industry validation the franchise received during its entire...
But that leads us directly into a massive point of contention, and honestly, a point of genuine frustration for anyone looking at the sheer scale of this achievement.
Yeah, this part makes people really mad.
Because despite sustaining the British film industry for a decade, these films faced an unbelievable, almost coordinated snub from the most prestigious awards body in the world.
Let's look at the actual data. Across 8 films, they racked up 6 National Movie Awards, 3 BAFTA Film Awards, and they did receive 12 Academy Award nominations.
But look at what those nominations were for.
Right. Visual effects, art direction, costume design, and makeup. They were universally recognized for the physical craft of world.
But across a decade of continuous, groundbreaking production, billions of dollars in revenue, and immense cultural impact, the franchise never won a Best Picture Oscar.
Never.
In fact, it was never even nominated for Best Picture. Not a single time across 8 films. I mean, how is that even possible?
This raises a fascinating, broader question about the cultural valuation of media, specifically how the Academy views youth-oriented fantasy.
They have such a bias.
Historically, the elite awards bodies have a profound prejudice against genre filmmaking, and an even deeper prejudice against anything perceived as being for adolescents.
Just because it's for kids.
The Academy voters can look at the film, admire the lighting, and say, oh, the costumes are brilliant, the makeup is impeccable, and award it a technical nomination. But they compartmentalize it as craft rather than art.
Wow, craft versus art.
They view a film featuring wizards and wands as popcorn entertainment, completely ignoring the massive thematic weight of the later films, which grapple with fascism, prejudice, and the horrors of war.
It's so hypocritical, especially when you look at how they treated the other massive fantasy franchise of that exact same era, The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, exactly. The perfect comparison.
That series swept the Oscars,
Yeah.
taking home 17+ awards, including a massive Best Picture win for its finale.
Because Lord of the Rings is perceived as high fantasy for adults, it has a literary pedigree that the Academy respects.
Right.
But think about what the Potter franchise accomplished. It grossed $7.7 billion. It literally built the modern infrastructure of the British film industry, employing thousands of technicians for over 10 years.
It birthed a global generation of film.
Very few projects in the history of the medium have attempted a logistical feat that ambitious, and even fewer have executed it without the entire structure collapse.
Yeah, it didn't collapse.
Yet, because the protagonists started as children, it was locked out of the prestige conversation.
It's infuriating because it implies that a story loses its artistic validity simply because it appeals to young people.
Which is just not true.
But ultimately, as we've discussed, a cultural legacy vastly outlasts a golden trophy. The franchise didn't need the Academy's validation to cement its place in history. It became a generational touchstone without.
Which brings us to the present moment and a highly controversial final note about where this legacy goes.
Yeah, the future.
Because the story isn't over. We aren't just looking back at the original film. We are currently looking forward to a brand new adaptation. HBO is actively in development on a massive television reboot of the Harry Potter series.
A complete retelling of the original 7 books, but expanded into a serialized, multi-season television format.
Yep.
And yet, the internet reaction has been overwhelmingly negative. People seem to hate the idea before a single frame has even been shot.
Which is the natural defense mechanism of a fiercely protective fan base facing a reboot of a beloved property.
They don't want their memories touched.
Exactly. But regardless of how that new series turns out, there's a profound takeaway here for you, the listener.
Yeah, what's the lesson in all this chaos?
Whether you are leading a corporate team, managing a long-term creative project, or just trying to build something lasting in your own life, look at the messy blueprint of this franchise.
It's a great case study.
To survive an impossible project, you must find a team that understands the core Hermione truth, the emotional anchor of what you are building. You need the structural flexibility to tear up your schedule when things change.
Like the kids growing up.
Exact. And most importantly, you need the resilience to keep laying the bricks, even when the elite institutions refuse to acknowledge your work.
So what does this all mean? It means the magical, seamless world we watched on screen was a total illusion.
And a beautiful...
It wasn't the result of a flawless master plan executed by corporate machine. It was the result of a grueling, chaotic, deeply human, 11-year marathon. It was a production that operated on the bleeding edge of disaster. From desperately faxing scripts to a live set and combating teenage growth spurts with needle and thread, to navigating restrictive child labor laws and mourning devastating on-set tragedies. They constructed an evolving factory of imagination that fundamentally altered cinema history, whether the Academy admits it or not.
Well said. But I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. One that connects everything we've unpacked today directly to this upcoming.
Ooh, okay. Lay it on us.
Consider the possibility that the original films succeeded precisely because of their terrifying constraints.
Oh.
They were operating under the brutal ticking clock of aging child act. They were forced into creative ingenuity by the blind panic of adapting an unfinished narrative. They captured lightning in a bottle with chaotic, instinctual casting.
Because failure was literally one bad week away, they were forced into a state of constant, brilliant survival.
Exactly. The friction generated. So if this new HBO television removes every single one of those constraints,
right?
If the studio gives the new creators all the time in the world, an unlimited prestige television budget, and a fully completed set of books where every character's ultimate fate is all...
No more secrets.
Right. Does that guarantee a masterpiece? Or does stripping away the chaos, the panic, and the friction actually remove the very pressure cooker environment that created the magic in the first something for you?
Wow. If you build a skyscraper on completely solid ground with infinite time and perfect blueprint, maybe it just doesn't have the same soul as the one built in a hurricane on a fault.
That's a great way to look at it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an incredible, revealing journey through the chaotic and impossible blueprints of a cultural giant. Keep questioning the blueprints and stay curious.